Hey everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Yo, what's happening, Rush Nation? We're back. It's week 333 of lockdown. I have completely lost all semblance of reality now. But guess what? It's 5 Yard Rush, and baby, this train does not keep going. It's Tuesday. We're back with you. It's me and Murf. Big man, how you doing?
Yeah, wait. So the train doesn't keep going, i.e. the train stopped?
Yeah, because we've got off the train and we're now on a maglev, which never stops because it's floating on rails. See, this is what I'm talking about. Everybody, the train obviously is still going because I'm here talking to you. I've just checked out. That's what's happened. I've got off the train and it stopped for me.
I'm sitting there like, I understand. Are we just doing this for fun now? Like what? It's, good to talk to you after what is probably the strangest bank holiday of our lives.
Non-existent, I would like to say.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I didn't have to do much work. I did a little bit, but yeah, I think it's a strange scenario we're all still in. Did catch up on some good TV shows though. And those of you who like box set recommendations, Sunderland Till I Die is excellent, even if you're not a big football fan.
Nope.
Really, really, really interesting. Just it's all about the behind the scenes, right? So it's about the owner and about the managing director and stuff like that, and how they handle the running of the football club. And it's gone through a big change and everything. So even if you don't like football, it's still really interesting. Plus, it's got a guy who's basically like David Brent. It's hilarious. It's like putting David Brent in a real life scenario. It is very, very funny. It's just a very, very good show. Ozark season 3. That was Boss. That was really good.
I've not seen season 1 or 2.
Boss show. Very dark. Don't think that'd be an Emma Falls Asleep kind of show, I think. But Anna likes it, which is good. And then what else I watch? Oh, Save Me 2. Nearly done with that. Which is the sequel to Save Me, which is also a dark but pretty good show.
You've cranked out some television, my man.
Yeah, just that was the right thing to do, really. That's pretty much what else can you do really during these times?
Yeah,
watch tape, which I've done, read some books, which I've done.
Have you seen the latest episode of Tiger King, like the new release?
No, I'm saving that, but okay. I will do.
It's not really Tiger King. It's somebody else doing an
No, it's Joe McHale. He's doing a post. It's like E-News.
Really good. Guy. Everyone said it was boring and stuff, but I think it's really good. It was interesting.
Yeah. I haven't seen it yet. I'm saving that to go along with Quiz, which is about the coughing major on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. That aired last night, tonight, and tomorrow night. So I wait till I get all 3 episodes of that, and then I'll watch that. I don't like to do the traditional thing. And then Killing Eve's back this week. In fact, you can watch episode 1 now, I think, but I'm going to wait till Sunday because I'm like that.
Well, we're going to start watching series 1 tonight, I think, of Killing Eve. So,
Boss, such a good show. Definitely one of the best shows.
Everyone's always said it's good, but we've just never got around to it. And we've just finished The Split, the BBC thing.
Really good. Yeah.
Yeah, the first series was good, and the second series was really good as well. And I imagine
we watched that.
There's going to be a third because the way they left it, there's obviously more tale to tell. So, but man, look, we're not here to talk TV and BBC dramas. We're here to talk football, fantasy football, and everything gridiron related. How about articles this week, man? We've been dropping articles daily at the moment, coming into draft season. We've had mock drafts and then your PAS streaming pieces, which, spoiler alert, we're going to be talking about later on. Murphy's going to be explaining his PAS metric. And yeah, lots of articles. Got some new writers as well, which is always good.
Always on the lookout for more. So if you are listening to this thinking, I'd really like to try my hand at writing and just see what happens. Really good thing to do during the lockdown, if nothing else. But yeah, just drop us an email, 5rush@gmail.com, and you can do that and join in on all the fun. Love to have you. We're looking for really sort of unique perspectives and ideas. I guess is where PAS sort of was born from, but yeah, as at the moment we've got a lot of mock drafts. The draft is 9 days away as we're recording this, and I guess that's kind of when we get to May 1st is when we start talking about what's going to happen with the teams, and we know where everyone's going to be. So lots of things going on. We need more content, so this is a great time to join in now, especially as we start to learn a bit more about what's going to happen for the NFL season and things like that.
Yeah, there's guess what? Spoiler alert. Well, not spoiler alert, but drink, Josh. Drink again. For you're in lockdown, why not? I imagine everyone's got a brew on the go right now. Josh is even writing. So if Josh can make time to come write for the podcast, then so can you, Rush Nation. So come get involved.
Well, he's got to finish it first.
Yeah, well, to be fair, he's now at least 2/3 of the way through. I've been talking to him today, but he had a little bit of an error. I tried to nurse him into using Google Docs, which he has done, but he's only been putting his finalized work into it. And I said, look, if you put everything in there, then you can tweak it as you go and it will save. But then he somehow managed to select it, delete it, and then go out of the document. So he lost a little bit of work today from what he did, because he was trying to do a word count and deleted it. I'm still not sure how you did it, Josh, but well done, sir, for putting it in a Google Doc and starting off the right way. Yeah, man. But I've seen it and I've done a little bit of editing because that's what I do, you know me, Murf. But it's coming along quite nicely. Props to Josh for trying. So, like I said, not if Josh, because the man can write, obviously, but if Josh is doing it, you can do it. We need you on board, 5 Yard Rush family. Come get involved. If you've got an opinion and you can back it up with stats, we will certainly listen to that.
Definitely.
So we've had some reviews, big man.
Have we?
Or do we need more?
Well, I'm on the call for reviews.
We need reviews. Rush Nation, we would really appreciate it if you head over to iTunes, give us a little 5-star. iTunes or Apple Podcasts? It's Apple Podcasts now, isn't it?
It's Apple Podcasts.
See, this lockdown is absolutely destroying my grey matter.
Your brain, isn't it?
Yeah, I need to take up playing chess again. Oh, Rush Nation, there's a challenge. If you get yourself a little chess app or a chess fan, let me know via Murf on Twitter at 5 Yard Rush that you want to fancy playing me, and I'll give you a game of chess because that will get my brain ticking again.
Nice. I'll give you a game.
All right.
I haven't played since I was like 16, but I still know the rules.
It's like riding a bike.
Yeah, that's how I like to see it. So.
Yeah, so do give us some reviews. We'd really appreciate that. Thursday's show is going to be an absolute banger.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, really, really good guest this week. Just really excited. Sorry, I had a thing pop up.
That's all right.
I was trying to stop it. Bad audio. Sorry for the edit. When you're editing this later, sorry. So yeah, no, we got a really, really awesome guest this week. Who's someone whose work I've been listening to and now have the pleasure of reading. His monstrous 1,200-page behemoth scouting profile. That's the clue. We haven't recorded it yet. We're going to be recording it on Thursday. So really looking forward to spending some time, been emailing him and asking him some questions. He's got some hot draft takes. And I think what better way before we do our final draft next week before the NFL draft, what better guest could we have than the one we've got on Thursday talking through the rookies. And if you have any questions, you're listening to this, you want to know about prospects, drop us a line on Twitter, and I will pick the best ones and ask him a few.
I have so many, so good luck getting in front of me, Rush Nation, because spoiler, I control the queue. So yeah, if we agree on a prospect, then you'll probably hear about him. If we don't, then you won't. No, I'm joking. Of course, we're going to get your guys into the chat on Thursday. Man, oh man, let's do some news. And the news is brought to you by helmethouse.co.uk. Yes, Rush Nation, you can still head over to Helmet House and get yourself a signed NFL helmet by one of your favorite players. And if you use the code, is it 5 Yard Rush?
Yes.
Yeah, use the code 5 Yard Rush at checkout. You can get 5% off your order. So deck out those man caves during lockdown, or lady caves. That sounds wrong. Deck out those places that are decorated in NFL merchandise over at helmethouse.co.uk. Right, here comes the news. The NFL and NFLPA have reached an agreement on a voluntary off-season program set to start 2 days after my birthday on April the 20th, but it won't involve on-field workouts until all 32 clubs' facilities can reopen.
Yeah, so basically this is to stop any kind of competitive advantage. So There's probably teams like Arizona and Cleveland that aren't as badly affected as, say, the New York teams. So really, it's about not allowing any of the facilities to open until everybody is safe. That also will give us a more clear timetable as to when football can return, if it does return on time. And then when it comes to the virtual stuff, it's the kind of stuff they'd be doing anyways, which is like the classroom learning, the reviews of plays and tape and things like that. So it's a way of just trying to get players up to speed. It's a way of communicating with players, maybe sorting out fitness regimes, etc., doing the classroom stuff, but knowing they can't practice at the facility until every city is clear and reopened. It's safe for every team to have everybody at the facility.
Sounds fair. I mean, it wouldn't be fair if somebody had 4 months advantage on another team, would it?
Well, yeah, and I think on top of that, I don't think that would have been that much, but definitely there would have been some sort of advantage. And on top of that, I think it's just a case of it gives the league sort of a few more options as to when it's likely to begin. It's like it's going to be. It's kind of giving them a sign of, okay, well, if it's not safe in one city to open the facility, then we'll know what we'll need to do with the rest of the season. Do we shorten it? Do we push it back, or whatever it needs to happen? Really.
Fair play, fair play. Right, CMC went and got himself paid. The Panthers are signing running back Christian McCaffrey to a 4-year, $64 million extension. Most, I say for fantasy, is the most explosive back in the league. Got himself a decent deal, but it has, shall we say, absolutely annihilated the market going forward.
Yeah, so he becomes the highest paid running back of all time. Few things to point out on this. First of all, it's an extension, so he will still be on his rookie contract deal this year. So whatever is going to be allocated to Christian McCaffrey this year on the cap, the last year of his rookie deal, that's what he'll get paid this year. That 4-year, $64 million deal will start from 2021. We don't know all the details in terms of how many years that's guaranteed or the structure of that. It is an average of $16 million per year, which makes it the most expensive running back contract of all time. It's interesting to see what they're going to do with Christian McCaffrey. I would say that it's probably going to be likely he'll probably move to be a wide receiver, because there's no way I can see him going to age 30 given the amount of tread he's had at his tires already and the amount of carries. I mean, I think he played like 99.2% of snaps last year. I don't think there's going to be room for him to do that over the next 5 years. So I think they've probably given him that contract with a view to him maybe playing in the slot moving forward. But until we know what the breakdown is and when they can get away from that contract, we've said it time and time again that running back contracts are very difficult. There's a big argument to not pay them because it messes your alignment on the cap. And it just doesn't really work out. We've seen it with David Johnson and Todd Gurley. Lamar Miller. These are guys who set the market previously, and they never delivered on that second contract. I was actually listening to Andrew Brandt, former GM of the Green Bay Packers, and he was talking about a couple of ways in which we could help with running backs. And the first is to remove the 3-year eligibility in college, so that running backs can enter the NFL quicker, and then also a way of maybe restructuring their rookie deals so that they get more. I think something needs to be done on running backs because their best years are 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. And that's why it's kind of not advisable to get second contracts for teams because it just never really pans out. But fingers crossed, I hope for McCaffrey it does because he's a wonderful player and a great fantasy asset.
I didn't know you had to be 3 years in college.
Yeah, it's a 3-year eligibility in college, so you have to have done 3 years.
Studied for 3 years. Or
Yeah,
played.
yeah. So, well, no, you could play 1 year, but as long as you are a junior, you can't basically come into the NFL unless you've finished your junior year.
Okay, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
That's why you don't get sophomores or anything coming in. The reason why and the reason why the NFL have it is for medical reasons. They know how physical the game is, and therefore they want athletes' bodies to be fully
Battle
developed.
hardened.
Basically, well, just if you think about physical development, that the science says it's around your 2021 is kind of when you're about done with your major growing. Obviously, you can still grow after that stage, and then there's the battle, mass and weights and everything that you can do. But in terms of just your physical conditioning, really, you're kind of done your major growing until you're sort of 2021. So that's why you have to be at least 21 years old to enter the NFL.
There you have it. Something new every day. Every day's a school day. NFL Network's James Palmer reported on Monday that DeAndre Nuke Hopkins has passed his physical, pushing his blockbuster trade from the Texans to the Arizona Cardinals that one step closer to being official. How do you go about doing that?
I guess he would have gone to a doctor that would have been approved by the Cardinals. They would have worked something out, I'm sure. It's interesting, really, that obviously there's a big reason why we're not really getting that second wave of free agents and where the free agency is effectively stopped. It's because of these medicals, and there's a lot of things that haven't happened. Like Todd Gurley's move isn't even official yet because he's not had a physical. There's a lot of things that are still in the wings. Even a lot of those free agency deals that we covered through the track and we talked about probably still aren't completed because of medicals that need to be done. Because it's important, you need to check the physical health. But it looks like they've arranged something for Hopkins, which if he's your sort of top target, you'd obviously pull out the stops. It's a shame, really, because if I was Bill O'Brien, with everything that happened, I would have found a way to tank the deal or reneged on it or whatever to, because at the moment he is still technically a Houston Texan. So there is still a way out if Bill O'Brien can find it.
He probably should, considering the flack he's caught for this already, surely, right?
Well, yeah, I don't know what the recourse would be and the financial penalty to do that, but yeah.
I guess the same goes for David Johnson. He's not officially a Texan yet.
Correct.
Oh, I've taken him in a couple of best ball leagues. This could be terrible.
I'm sure it will go through.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. So the 49ers announced that they have re-signed veteran cornerbacks Jason Verrett and Dante Johnson, while the Steelers have brought in former XFLer Saeed Blacknell, who is a wide receiver. Is that a depth move, bringing Blacknell in, or do you think he's going to try and compete with Juju and, Washington and then
Deontay Johnson?
Yeah.
In all honesty, you don't really know. I mean, listen, I expect Blacknell to compete for a starting job? Probably not. I mean, he was injured in the XFL, and the standard is not what it is in the NFL, right? So he played for LA, and he is someone who I think. I mean, he looked all right. Like, I'm not saying he looked bad. I mean, obviously, I think they brought him in to work him out and see what he can do. But playing for the LA Wildcats is not the same as playing for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I would say that it's really just to see how he stands. I mean, there's no cost to it. Every team at this stage can have 93 men on the roster, and then they do the cut down. So to 55, I think it is this year now. So they've added extra bodies. So it does mean that they can just see he's got a lot of pace. He's sort of an X. So which Washington hasn't quite worked out to be that. And I wouldn't say Deontay Johnson is the quickest player. I mean, he's quick, but I wouldn't say he's a speedster. So maybe that's kind of why they looked at Blacknell. But he's always had a bit of a history of injuries, even in college at Penn State. So, but Dante Johnson and Jason Verrett are good re-signings to get those cornerbacks back on the roster. For the 49ers, I think they're smart veteran moves.
Yeah. So a bit of sad news now. Former Seahawks, Vikings, and Bills quarterback Tavares Jackson unfortunately died Sunday in a car accident in Alabama. That was reported by Ian Rappaport of NFL Network. And Jackson was he's only 36, so real sad news there.
Yeah, I mean, it's bad when you hear people die, especially players I remember, but more importantly, someone who's very close to aging me. You talk about a year or so in it. Really sad and tragic. I remember when he played for the Seahawks, he had sort of a full season, and then he left. I think he went to the Bills, but don't quote me on that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he went to the Bills. Didn't play there, and then he came back, and he was Wilson's backup at Seattle when they won the Super Bowl. So it's a really sad thing when you lose players, especially that age, and especially in the tragic circumstances. And hope his family are coping with the loss, and thoughts and prayers go out to them.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Indianapolis Colts, who, oh, by the way, are having a rebrand, just like what seems every other team in the NFL currently right now. Buccaneers started it, looked pretty ream when it came out. Then the Falcons went and did the complete opposite to the Buccaneers, right, and got themselves an awful jersey and rebrand. I mean, what is that ATL all about? I get it's the 3 letters for Atlanta, but come on, it does not belong on the front of your jersey. And then the Colts have joined the bandwagon. Good one there. See that? A cowboy pun. It was in there. No, whatever. The Colts have jumped on board as well. They've rebranded a little bit of their writing, got a secondary logo, and they've tweaked their helmet design, I believe. But I really like the second logo because they've incorporated the outline of Indianapolis into the middle of the sea. And yeah, I think it's good. But the Colts anyway, they've added a blocker to the stable of running backs, and so they've signed fullback Roosevelt Nix on a 1-year deal.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I don't know really why I put this in here. I was like, well, I like Roosevelt Nix. He's a fullback. Fullbacks don't really matter in the NFL anymore. He'll probably get like 30 carries this year, and that'll be the end of that.
Yeah, unless you're Carl Juszczyk.
Yeah, but he's more involved in like the blocking and schemes. And I guess maybe that's what they bring Nix in for. It's quite a forward-thinking move, I suppose. And if they're going to use him as an additional blocker, the Colts. And as for the rebrand, I mean, it looks all right. You can't hate it, but
it's nothing really, is it? It's not offensive enough to cause any issue if you don't like it. It's pretty much exactly the same as it was, just a slight wording. They've changed the logo, the way the wording.
I just don't get why. There's no need to mess with. There's just no need to mess with things unless things are particularly bad. That's what I don't understand. There was nothing wrong with their logo. You didn't need to mess with it. And it's a second logo. Why do you need a second logo? What's wrong with the first one? I don't know. I just think it's a thing that you just didn't need to do. And I think you look at some teams that make these rebrands. It's just not necessary. The Buccaneers did it. Buccaneers fans didn't want the rebrand in 2014. We got it. It stunk. So we got basically the old one back, slightly refreshed, and a great color rush jersey. Atlanta shouldn't have messed with their jerseys because they look awful, and at least now everyone knows what the airport code is for Atlanta Airport. Because I mean, someone must have been watching. I mean, I love the Carolina Panthers Twitter where they used Adam Sandler from The Longest Yard for the for like a meme and everything they put on the video. That was class. I just don't know what they were thinking. I don't get, like, it's fine. Like if they'd unveiled that as like, oh my god, we're a brand new team or something, I'd be like, yeah, it looks all right. But with an existing thing, I mean, there's a reason why teams like the Patriots and the Steelers just don't rebrand. They just don't need to. You don't need to. Like, the value is the brand. If you keep changing the brand, it becomes less valuable. You've got the Colts, you've got Johnny Unitas, you've got all that history and tradition. I kind of feel like what are you changing it for? Because you're not doing yourself any favors.
Well, all they've done is change the font of the word Colts. That's pretty much it. And added a secondary logo, which gives them more merchandise production, I guess.
That's it. I don't know. I just think it weakens the brand personally, but that's me.
Well, I'm going to be buying a hat, so for them, it's done well for me.
With your hat collection behind you.
Yeah, this is just...
Where's your Tampa Bay hat, by the way?
I don't have one yet. I was waiting for the rebrand so I could get a teal snapback.
Teal?
That's what it's called, isn't it?
No, pewter. Teal's blue.
Teal could be any colour to me. Literally any colour.
Teal's like a light blue.
See, there you go. I don't know. Pewter. What colour's pewter? Grey? Supposed to be grey?
Grey.
Yeah. It looks black anyway, but
for those listening, Stocks is colourblind. Probably more than any human being I've ever met.
that is not. No. Not taking that. That is a joke. Absolute farce going on here.
Okay,
I am pretty colorblind.
You're pretty.
I don't know why I'm trying to brush over this.
On a side note, it's your birthday this Saturday coming. We unfortunately can't have a beer together for it, but I have ordered you something. I'm not going to lie. I used the promo code 5 Yard Rush
on Helmet House
on NFL Europe. So if you go, if you're looking for a new logo, a new jersey from NFL Europe. No, we're not rebranding. You got me talking about logos. If you want to buy a new jersey, if you want to pre-order the pewter Brady jersey, like I've done, or anything else, you can use the promo code 5 Yard Rush on NFLEurope.co.uk, and you get 10% off your order. Which, if you're buying a jersey, it's £80. That's not a bad little discount there at all. But yeah, I've bought you something on NFL Europe. It should be with you. Hopefully tomorrow or in the next day or two, be before Saturday. And I think for the next video podcast, if it's here before Thursday or if it's here the following Tuesday, you should, spoiler alert, something you wear, obviously, if it's from NFL Europe, you should wear it.
Okay, all right. Well, I won't wear it Thursday because that would be opening it before my birthday, so that would be bad luck. But I will wear it next Tuesday on the video show.
Nice.
As long as it fits. I mean,
I hope so.
Yeah. I appreciate you buying me something, big man. Obviously, you didn't have to.
It's your birthday. Why wouldn't you? Go have something for your birthday. So hopefully it's something you appreciate and like. But yeah, just wanted to take this opportunity to wish you a happy early birthday, I guess.
Well, thanks very much, mate. I appreciate it. But yeah, 34, rocking on, getting there. Towards 35, I guess. I mean, I don't know where I'm getting.
Thanks for that. Kicking the teeth. I'm not there yet, but very close.
Well, there's like a year, less than a year between us.
I know.
Yeah, kicking the teeth. Crikey.
I just don't want to think about being 35.
Why? It's just a number.
No, it's not just a number.
It's literally a number. And age is nothing. I feel way older than 34.
That's fair.
Right, back to the news. The Titans coach, Mike Vrabel, is not the first to use clock manipulation to his advantage, as we saw against the Patriots. But his use of the tactic during the playoffs has led to the rule now being vetted by the NFL's competition committee.
Yeah, there's a few rule changes that have been proposed to the competition committee that the owners are going to talk about in their next meeting. It was cancelled the first time around due to coronavirus. So whenever I think it's one at the end of this month or towards the end of this month. So Mike Vrabel did actually what Bill Belichick has done in the past, and the fact that he was really unhappy with it was almost quite funny. So what Vrabel was doing was he was committing multiple dead ball penalties. And what this would do is allow the game clock to keep moving for a bit, and it would actually burn more time off the clock. So I think the play clock is 40 seconds. If you have multiple dead ball penalties, then obviously that kills some clock. Extra 5 seconds, 10 seconds here, and then it burns more clock than just the 40 you would do to run down a play. So that's why he was doing it, and why players were doing it. Nothing major, but just enough to, you burn the yards. If you're just killing time anyway, it doesn't really matter. A few other suggestions. The Eagles decided that they are desperate to extend the overtime to 15 minutes, which took years to get it to 10. So don't know what they're doing. Good old Eagles have to just do something massive. They also want to minimize the impact of the overtime coin toss, which I don't quite know how they're planning to do that. I haven't heard the actual proposal.
The impact.
Yeah, basically, because if you
get a cushion for when it hits the floor or whatever they're talking about.
That'd be hilarious. It's obviously because if you win the coin toss in the playoffs, you have a very significant advantage. Because if you score a touchdown, you win the game. So like the AFC title game a couple of years ago, Arrowhead, where the Patriots scored a touchdown and Kansas City didn't even get a chance to get on the field to see what they could do. So yeah, I don't know what they're proposing. They also have asked for a alternative to the onside kick. So basically, for teams that are trailing, because the onside kick is so ineffective and you pretty much can't do it anymore, they want to have for a trailing team the opportunity to do like a 4th and 15 from the 25, something like that, which is similar to what the XFL implemented. Another proposal.
I didn't see any of the XFL. Did that work at all? Did anyone try it?
I don't remember anyone actually doing it. It might have done. It's not going to happen often. I don't know how I feel about it. As a kickoff, I think like 4th and 15 is what I'd say highly makeable. Well, it's not highly makeable. There's a decent chance you can do a 4th and 15. Maybe like a 4th and 20 or 4th and 25, I think would be. It's better odds than doing the onside kick, but it's still like goes in, because you don't want to make it too accessible, and therefore everyone just does it, and then just basically get rid of the kickoff. Like you got to be a bit careful. Otherwise, you could have one team that could nail that so often, and then end up basically not getting the ball back. So I don't know how that's going to work. So we'll see. And then the one thing that they also wanted, there's a few other proposals that are coming in that they're going to talk about. I think the Dolphins proposed one. I've forgotten what it was. Oh, I think it's talk about like illegal blindside blocks and things like that. So a load of rules anyway can be discussed. But the one thing that is not going to be back next year is pass interference. Pass interference is gone. Pass interference, well, the reviews process is gone.
This could be a whole different ball game with no pass interference.
No, the pass interference reviews are gone. That's just completely gone. That won't be back. Oh, Sky Judge, that was one I was missing. Sky Judge, which was in the AAF a couple of years ago. They're talking about having. Well, they're going to bring it to the table to vote.
That's good, because it was very good when it was in the AAF.
I really enjoyed it. I thought it was excellent. We talked about it on the pod at the time. Something I do hope they do bring in. I think that will help massively.
And then finally, due to the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, the XFL on Friday informed all employees via conference call that the league is suspending operations.
Yeah, the XFL died in the way the AAF did, and every other league beforehand has died. It's a shame. Mm-hmm. A lot of people were a bit too gleeful that it's ended. I think it had a chance. Coronavirus obviously put pay to that, but I do think it had a chance to make it. I wouldn't have said like a high percentage chance, but I do think that its viewing figures were decent. It was watchable. I thought the games were pretty good. I was quite happy to watch it. So I'm a little disappointed. I do think there is room for a league, a development league. I think we talked about this with Ross Tucker when he was on. Yeah. I do think there's a room to have these players do something, and I think it would be good to have. I still wouldn't mind NFL Europe, World League, something like that come back. I think that would be something extra, just to get you through. It's a long time. If you think you're talking about beginning of February to the end of September, it's just you're talking over half a year. Like, it'd be just nice to have something in between, just to wet your whistle and just to keep going. Like the World League, you had Barcelona and you had London, you had all these Frankfurt. It'd be great to have that back. It'd be some great options there, and there's a market for it now. I don't think you've got a better time to do it than now. But that's me.
Yeah, I mean, the global league surely is a thing that's going to happen eventually, because of how expanding the game is becoming into the world. Everywhere is now. You think Germany, us, Canada, but then they've got the CFL, and then you've got Mexico, Brazil. I mean, we've charted last week in India, Poland. I mean, there's a thirst out there for American football, and surely eventually a team almost like the IPL might happen, where you get teams bid on players that aren't necessarily in the NFL out of season, who can then possibly get a role in the NFL the next following season through a format like that. So maybe I've just come up with an international business plan, Murf, that we need to implement.
I don't think we have the hundreds of millions that it would require, but I like your enthusiasm.
Yeah, but COVID could have driven the price right down at the moment.
30 quid. Done.
30 quid. Let me get my wallet. I'm there. I'm all over it. Right, Murf. Let's talk about streaming, the concept of streaming, and more importantly, your points against streaming metric. Where do you want to start?
I think to those that haven't read, so if you don't know, last year or last season, I wrote a piece or a column every week talking about streaming and who the best streaming options were that week. To set that parameter, the parameters were to pick players that were less than 30% owned, so extremely challenging. And as soon as they hit that 30% metric of ownership, even if I had them or had used them in the past, I had to basically not use them. So Darren Waller, I used week 1, week 2, and his ownership spiked above 30%, and it never went down, and that was it. For an example. So what I did was basically tracked where I finished for the season in all positions. And if I pull up the data here. I finished with the quarterback 2, the running back 33, the wide receiver 30, the tight end 8, the kicker 5, and the DST 7 after a disappointing week 16. So what I did is basically worked out. I was gutted because I went from 5 to 7. And I was trending as well, like really high for the rest of the season. The worst one was wide receiver. I actually had the wide receiver 24 going into the final week of the season, and I had Anthony Miller, and he got injured, and then he got 1.2 points. Finished with 107 for the week in week 16, and that burned me 6 spots. That cost me. That's how close it was.
Wow.
But that's what happens, right? That's the game. So what I did was charted this, and then worked out what I was getting on a points per game average, and then what I did was create a chart and a metric that basically looked at all the players who, on a points per game basis, as long as they played sort of a minimum amount of games. So I think 6 was the absolute minimum I would allow. Then would work out what they got, what their points per game average was, and how their points per game worked against my streaming model, and then that got the points against streaming. So I was looking to understand who finished with positive points against streaming scores, ones with negative points against streaming scores, but then more importantly, how effective were positions. So how scarce were those positions on a points against streaming basis, on a points per game average, and to work out where the value was in streaming positions versus ones where you had to heavily invest in the draft and then maybe stream to fill some depth. So that was the kind of purpose for where this all kind of grew. And as of right now, it's in a series. So 5 parts of it have been written. One, a summary, then one to explain what PAS is in more detail. And then I've done quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends is about finished. Literally finishing touches should be out. What are we saying? Thursday?
Yeah, or Friday, whatever. We got basically the week is full of articles to go out now, so it just depends when you get ready. I mean, mine's ready. I just need to format it, but that's a couple. I say couple. It's probably going to take me longer than that because it's a lot of words. And then one of our new writers, Mr. T. Scott, has got a article pretty much in the pipeline as well. So it's a race to get
probably
finished.
Thursday.
It's a race to get finished.
Well, yeah, like I said, I'm almost done. Just a couple of little bits, and it'll be done and formatted. So tight ends will be done. Then it's just down to kickers and defenses, which will be done in the next couple of weeks.
Can I interject quickly?
Yeah.
I think what we should do before you dive really deep into PAS is, if you are a new listener and you are new to the Rush Nation family and you don't know what streaming is essentially picking up a player off of the waiver wire or free agency pool if your waivers have cleared during the week, and replacing somebody on your roster with that waiver wire ad or free agent. So when Murf talks about streaming, he might have picked up Anthony Miller. Let's use him as an example because he mentioned his name. And you've gone and dropped Deshaun Hamilton, let's just say, for instance, and you've picked up Miller to play as your flex or a wide receiver if you need help on a bye week. So yeah, streaming is the art of picking up and dropping players on a weekly basis for a roster spot that you don't necessarily need filled. So if you've got a guy you think is going to explode at the beginning of the season, and yet 5 weeks in, 3 weeks in even, let's say, has done nothing for you, there's no point in holding on to him in case he goes off, because let's face it, if he hasn't gone off in 5 weeks, the chances of you actually playing in week 6 thinking, oh, this could be the week, is unlikely. When you've got people like Murf, myself, the rest of the fantasy football community who put waiver wire articles out, and especially at quarterback, tight end, DST, kicker, as Murf has told us, and we'll go into more detail. If you can stream somebody who is a point above the players that you would have, i.e. the PAS streaming system, you're going to be scoring more points and eventually winning your games. So streaming is an important art of using players off the waiver wire and free agency pool to better their roster.
Yeah, exactly that. And it goes into roster construction. So the whole point is to look at how to build an optimal roster. And then you start to realize actually where you do need to invest and what the pointing at streaming metrics work out per article or per position is actually position scarcity. So in terms of how difficult it is to stream certain positions off the waiver wire. And if that's the case, how do we combat that? And what do we do? Versus, and it is about drafting. So it all goes back to drafting, goes back to the very beginning. If you know you've got viable options that you can pick up off the waiver wire, do you need to invest a high value draft pick in order to get that position when you've got a viable streamer that you can pick up? And that's ultimately where all of this comes from. So it's a way of changing your perspective of how you view drafting, but then more importantly, it's how to gain a significant advantage through the season. So I talked about last week in the articles, and do go and read them on firerush.co.uk, with wide receivers that actually, because the position is so deep, but yet it's also scarce in terms of top talent. Actually, one way to get an advantage is, rather than just to sit in there holding players hoping that they come good, is actually just to stream a couple of bench players. On the grounds of, if they then hit, you're more likely to get a top 30, top 25 wide receiver than you are just having someone who's just on your roster who you're hoping is going to come good, but actually holds no value until they do. It's the same way with handcuffs. Handcuffs serve a purpose, especially towards the end of seasons where injuries are high. But actually, with wide receivers, the position is so deep that you don't need to have a handcuff wide receiver. You need to think about who you can stream. And in the article, I'm not going to go into all the detail in it, otherwise it would leave the point of reading it. But a lot of people don't like low-powered offenses. You hear this all the time. I don't really want Washington or the Bengals or whoever were poor offensive teams last year, but actually there's merits of matchup streaming, and that's something I talk about in the article. And actually you can look at those and decide if that's something that's worth going into play. And when you look at that, and I give some examples in the wide receiver piece, you actually come out ahead by doing matchup streaming. And actually you can gain a significant advantage by looking at the matchups, because after a certain amount of weeks, we know who the good offenses, but more importantly, who the good defenses are. And actually playing a wide receiver 2 in a good offense against a really good defense is not as good as playing a wide receiver 2 in a not so good offense against a really bad defense.
Yep.
So that's kind of some of the things to look at that streaming will present you, that if you have that flexibility on your bench, you can pick up additional points through the season, and it will equate to wins. I'm convinced of it.
Well, it did for you, man. Your strike rate getting to the big dance and winning was pretty big.
Yeah, it was good last year. Playoffs was about 87% of leagues that we played in made the playoffs, and nine titles from 36. So 25% of my leagues I won. There's obviously elements of luck in that, and there's elements where I gave myself the best percentage chance to win, and that's what streaming allows you to do. So I think the reason we're talking about this is it is so early to talk about it, but we're going to, the articles are there to read, and whenever it's the right time for you to digest that information, it's definitely worth going back and doing, because if you can get your head around streaming and the advantages it can give you, the advantages are massive. But what it will also do is tell you where you need to invest your draft picks, and it will just help you alleviate errors or minimize them as much as possible. If you pick a player, let's say, for example, you pick, here's a good example, Josh Jacobs in the 3rd round, 4th round last year, right? So people would have picked him. It would have been a great pick, and he gets injured. That happens. You can't prevent that. It didn't stop it from being the right pick at the right time. It didn't pay off for you at the end. That really happens. He had no real injury concerns. There's nothing you could have really done wrong there. But if you'd taken OJ Howard there, that pick's a disaster. It's an absolute car crash. If you took him in the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, in fact, if you drafted him at all last year, you really kind of messed up.
Yeah.
And you couldn't really see that kind of decline happening. But the way that roster construction goes, especially if you're reading the streaming pieces, is actually, did you need to make a tight end pick there? And is that really the smartest thing that you could have done? Whereas investing in an extra wide receiver or an extra running back could have yielded you a much better return, especially if you look at some of the players you would have got in the 5th round last year of running backs. There were some extremely good players. I'm just going to pull up here who you could have got in the 5th round. So these are 5th round players you could have got last year, both wide receivers or running backs. T.Y. Hilton, Tyler Boyd, Calvin Ridley, Philip Lindsay, Miles Sanders.
So all pretty good
Mike
options.
Williams, 6th round, Austin Eckler, Hunter Henry.
Yeah. Obviously Hunter Henry got injured.
Baker Mayfield, AJ Green, Jarvis Landry would have worked out. DJ Moore worked out for you nicely. Guys got injured. Jared Cook would have worked out nice at tight end, I suppose.
Yeah.
But one of the rare exceptions. Alshon Jeffrey didn't really work out. But that's my point is looking at, and I go into this more detail in this week's article that's coming out Thursday, is thinking about where you need to invest it and what the round per cost is, and therefore what's the overall cost. So if you're going to take a tight end in the 2nd or 3rd round, what are you giving up? More importantly, do you come out ahead? Now, it's not an exact number because you could hit all your draft picks in every round and you'll win. But what if you don't? And you just look at the averages of, if you were to draft a player in this round, what would the drop be per round? So dropping an extra round on wide receiver, an extra round on running back, you would need to do to accommodate the quarterback or tight end you would take. What's that going to cost you? If and then versus what the value of streaming or picking up a late option in the draft is. And that's kind of where I'm looking to go to give you different options, because a lot of people know to draft tight ends or draft quarterbacks late, but some people still go and invest in very early rounds. You're just basically leaving points on the board. And that's if you get, people look at like, oh, well, I've got the elite quarterback, as I've sort of talked about time and time again in this podcast. It doesn't always work out like that. There's always injuries, there's always things, and that replacement cost is just it's minimal. I can go and get the next guy and I'm not going to lose that much, but actually the replacement cost from picks wise is massive. Whereas if I lose CMC from my roster, I'm done, because the running back I'm going to get to replace him, if I'm lucky enough to get his handcuff, but let's say I can't get his handcuff because his handcuff's picked up, I can't fill that hole in my roster. I can fill a quarterback hole and I can fill a tight end hole. I cannot fill a running back or wide receiver hole in my roster. And if I'm pushing those players down on my draft in order to take other positions, that lowers what I get in each round, and it lowers the quality of the player I get. And then it requires me to get lucky with my pick. Last year you could have gone Travis Kelce in the 2nd round, and then you could have got Henry in the 3rd and Godwin in the 4th, and that would have worked out like a dream. But you could have also gone David Montgomery and Antonio Brown.
And OJ Howard in the 4th, that was a thing.
Or OJ Howard. But yeah, that's what I mean is, in certain positions in fantasy football, quarterback, kicker, tight end, and DST, you can replace pretty much their production. Maybe not entirely, but you can at least plaster it. Losing your QB and and I'm talking about standard 1 QB leagues here, or standard leagues. I'm not talking about even PPR. I'm just not talking about not your premiums, your tight end premiums or your super flexes or anything like that. Because there's so much depth, and that's kind of what PAS describes. If I talk about quarterbacks, for example, so quarterbacks last year, Lamar Jackson, smashed it. He beat my stream model by almost 7 points a game, 6.95. There were 6 quarterbacks that beat the stream model. The other 5, Deshaun Watson was second. He didn't even beat the stream by a point a game.
So basically, Lamar was the only man who beat the PAS metric, really.
With any real convincing, he was the only one that gave you an advantage.
Exactly.
And you drafted him. And where were you drafting him last year? 12th, 13th, 14th round?
Yeah, you're never going to be able to predict the quarterback one. I wonder how many times the quarterback one off the board in fantasy has been the quarterback one at the end of the season.
It's not often. I think it's twice in the last 10 years.
Well, there you go.
So it's not often. Deshaun Watson was second. He beat my PS stream by 0.93 points per game. So over the course of the year, he beat me by 20 points over a season. That's not going to make the difference of whether I make the playoffs or not.
No. And when you think you could gain that from streaming elsewhere as well, your tight end DST could score 20 points easily on a week if you're streaming correctly.
Exactly that. So that's kind of my point. Tight ends is slightly different. So for example, the big 3 tight ends last year were Kelsey, Kittle, and Ertz. Kelsey beat the stream by 7.69 points per game. Kittle beat the stream by 6.96 points per game. Ertz beat the stream by 5.47 points per game. There was Austin Hooper between them who beat them by 6.11. And that sounds really quite significant. You think, okay, so streaming tight ends might not be a good thing. But if you were streaming tight ends, you didn't invest in tight ends early, you could have picked up Mark Andrews very late or free in drafts,
or even on the waiver wire,
or Darren Waller. So, for example, Mark Andrews beat the stream by 4.91 points per game. He was someone that you could get going into the opening week of the season on waiver wires in most leagues.
Yep.
So if you didn't invest in the position, you're giving up 2.7 points per game to Travis Kelce. That's not going to cost you, because you're going to make that back through the wide receiver or running back that you took. Same goes with Darren Waller. He beat the stream by 4.72 points. The reason they beat the stream by that much is when you get to sort of week 8 in the season, it becomes much harder to stream the position because all the starters are kind of there. Injuries have kind of all worked out, and that is kind of all sort of evened out. But if you were streaming in the first few weeks, you would have landed a Mark Andrews, a Darren Waller, Will Dissly / Jacob Hollister. You would have ended up with Tyler Higbee towards the end of the season, and all of those would have carried you through. I talk about a scenario where in a league I had Darren Waller and Tyler Higbee, who both of which I picked up for free, and they would have equated to the tight end one if I played them in the right weeks.
How interestingly, I don't suppose you know this, but you picked Waller up in what, week 1 or 2, or even week 3, maybe?
Either before the season or week 1, yeah.
Okay,
but
so
prior to starting leads, but there's even week 1, week 2, he was still under 30% owned.
So let's say you picked him up at the beginning of the season, and then would you have necessarily played him every week, or would you? Because once you've got Darren Waller locked in, say, you're not going to still stream him, are you? If you pick up someone as someone like Waller who goes off exponentially, you're not expecting that from your streamer. But if you see, well, actually, we think Waller's now going to be up there in the top tier of tight ends, are you likely to stream him again, or?
Well, yeah, you would have had to with Waller towards the end of the season, because he was up there, and then towards the end of the season, he really sort of tapered off. And wasn't getting the touchdowns that he was getting early on. So someone like Higbee came about and was someone that you could have had real success with over the last 5 games, which would have been really handy if you lost Austin Hooper around the time that Tyler Higbee went off, which was a scenario that happened. And I guess that's kind of the point of streaming, is you've got to be a bit flexible. Lots of people draft too many tight ends. That's just a fact. A lot of people draft 2 tight ends, 3 tight ends. For me, let's say you do invest, and I personally don't subscribe to the theory that you need to draft a premium tight end, but let's say you do. If you then draft another tight end in your in your league and you have them sitting on your bench, it's an absolute waste. You're just using up a bench spot you don't need to.
Mhm.
So drafting a second tight end when you draft a premium one makes zero sense. Oh, but what about bye week cover? Well, if you have flexible streamers on your roster and especially on your bench, you just cut someone and you just pick up a tight end for the week. It's not a big deal. Um, my point is, it's just where you invest your draft capital, because every round is important, even the last round, so very important. So investing draft capital in a spare tight end, if you've got a premium, doesn't make sense. You're drafting 2-3 tight ends doesn't really make a lot of sense. The only way you would take 2 tight ends is if you take 2 tight ends late. So if you'd taken a Mark Andrews and Darren Waller, for example, that would have made sense. If you'd taken Austin Hooper, knowing he'd been quite flat, and you'd gone with like a Carl Rudolph, and then realised Carl Rudolph's not doing anything, you cut him by week 2, week 3, and then you use it as a flexible streaming option in your bench spot. All of that kind of makes sense. I'm not saying don't draft 2 tight ends, but I'm just saying if you draft a premium one, it doesn't make any sense at all. And if you don't, then fine, it's worth having 2. But once you've kind of got one that's performing to where you kind of want it to, you don't need to hold the second one on your roster. You just rotate it out and you just use it, and you maybe pick up another tight end and be flexible. But you could use it as a wide receiver spot. You can use it as a running back flex spot. And if you follow the articles that I put out, and you're streaming the wide receiver 30, people think that's not great. But there's 70 odd wide receivers that go in a draft.
Yep.
So I'm beating over half of them just with a stream. So if you're streaming what I stream every week, which I publish, you'll do better than over half the wide receivers that are drafted. I'm not saying don't draft wide receivers, because you still need to have them on your roster. You should ideally have 5 or 6. But by doing that, you are buying into the chances of people breaking out. But if they don't, just don't hold on to them. People held on to Anthony Miller far too long. They saw what he did at the end of the last season. He did absolutely nothing for about 10 weeks, and then he broke out towards the end. You could have got him back off waivers. People held on to John Ross, hoping he was going to come back from injury and be fire, and he wasn't, because teams adjust. You have to move as it moves, but you can't just hold a roster spot and go, oh, well, when he turns up in 6 weeks, he'll be great. One, that's not ever guaranteed, but 2, what are you doing with your bench spot for 6 weeks? It's just doing nothing.
Yeah, and they're the kind of guys who you hang on to with a hope and a prayer and think, oh, someone like Devontae Parker is on the waivers, but he's not been great. So the chance of him popping off on a double week, what Parker only does is he only ever goes off once. I mean, we've got the famous story of picking his only week 2 years ago, and we'll hang on to that mantra till the day we die. But last season, Devontae Parker turned up in a big way, and if you didn't put a claim in for him because you thought, Anthony Miller or John Ross was going to be the guy in a few weeks' time, and Parker was only going to have one good week, well, then you missed the boat, my friend.
And listen, I missed the boat on Devontae Parker last year. I didn't get him anywhere because I didn't buy into him. But that's okay. I still picked up other streamers that were just as effective. Some late season streamers I picked up were, let me give you some examples here, what I picked up late on waivers. Fits for his last 2 weeks of the season that were fantastic. I picked up Raheem Mostert in week 14. He finished as the running back 4. I finished with Anthony Miller in week 15, was the wide receiver 4. Ryan Griffin, he had 16 PPR points, finished as the tight end 7, which isn't fantastic, but 16 fantasy points is pretty good. These were all pretty late into the season. As a sort of mentioning, there's a load of players I picked up here sort of late on. I had Darius Slayton one week, and he got 21.1 fantasy points as a wide receiver 11. These kind of performances happen frequently. It's just about trying to find when they do and being smart about it.
Yeah, I think what I've learned from this series and reading your articles so far and the chats we've had and stuff off air and on air is I think drafting coming up is going to be a lot more wide receiver and running back based early on, casting my net as wide as possible, and then taking a quarterback, tight end, DST, and kicker later on, thinking that I could possibly replace these guys week 1 or week 2, or even stream them for the whole season, maybe catch some got stardust at some point, like Darren Waller, sorry, or even, there were some leagues where Lamar Jackson just wasn't drafted because people weren't switched on. And you think, well, if you gain a couple of sort of 10, 12 round receivers or running backs, that late running back that no one thought was going to go off, but did, or a wide receiver, rather than a tight end who wouldn't really matter. If you think you're going to week 1 with a couple of waiver claims and suddenly you manage to get Lamar and Darren Waller because people aren't switched on, or you decide, well, I'm going to smash 80% of my fab on these two guys because I think they're going to be it. All of a sudden, you've gone from streaming, and I'm not saying the PAS is wrong, but what PAS has taught me is the fact that I need to load up on wide receiver running back earlier and then fill the tight end and quarterback because I know that we can stream them, as opposed to running back and wide receiver are harder to stream. So get the positions that are harder to find earlier and then fill my roster from downward.
And I think that's it. And I think the thing is, people kind of believe that, but never really know why.
Yep.
So I think for those, this is the real pure numbers that's telling you that you need to do it. For those that have still got a bit of doubt, I understand it. And one thing is, you don't have to draft a kicker or a DST. That's another thing. Unless you're in a league that forces you to draft those positions, you don't have to. If your draft is a few days before the season, I understand drafting those positions 110%. If you're drafting in July, I don't get it. You don't need to. Sometimes I do it just to do it, but ultimately, you don't have to draft a kicker or a DST. I'm in dynasty leagues which I hold one kicker, and I've dumped them for the extra roster spot to try and predict or try and see who is the next big guy. And I'll pick one up a week or two before the season. Doesn't matter.
Kickers, you can pick one up the night before the Thursday night game. There'll be a kicker
100%.
out there, and the difference between, I don't know, kicker 12 and kicker 1 is, I've not looked into it yet, and I think you might have, or not sure, but the difference isn't big enough to make a difference, really.
No, it really isn't. If you look at kicker statistics across the season, the leading kicker last year was Harrison Butker. He finished with 166 points. The kicker 12 was Chris Boswell. He finished 40 points behind, which sounds like quite a lot. When you break that on a points per game basis, it's around 2.5 points a game.
Which you'll knock out the park by streaming everybody else.
Yeah, it's not a big points difference that you can get. You're not going to get a huge advantage with a kicker. I get it if you pick up the kicker 1, fine. I kind of half get it. DST, everyone's going to point to and go, oh, well, the Patriots, they were one of the best defenses of all time. They were 60 points clear. Blah, blah, blah. Yes, they were. It's called a statistical anomaly. That way, I'm pretty much confident that will never happen again. If I take the DST2 and the DST12, DST2 was the Steelers, by the way. DST12 was the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo Bills was someone who we said were a sneaky pick up this year, and they proved it. The point difference again, 43. You're looking at a difference of 2.7 fantasy points per game. Doesn't again matter on a point per point basis. You're not, people can say, oh well, I lost my week by 1 point something points, and that's why. Yeah, it's doubtful that they're not really going to be massive difference makers for you. So you can afford to not draft a kicker or a DST. One or the other or both. I would say probably pick up a DST, but either or. I don't think kickers overly have a massive place to move the needle. So don't draft a kicker if you're drafting in July, beginning of August. Pick an extra guy. You never know. That guy might make your roster, and you might end up cutting someone who you had high hopes for who gets injured or something like that. Yeah, I think that's really all. I'm finishing the series over the next few weeks. Tight end will be out Thursday. I think it's probably the most compelling read yet because I kind of work out what the cost of doing business is at the early tight ends, and you can insert quarterbacks, and the logic is still the same. And if you've got any questions, just let me know because from what people have told me when they have filled this in or they've read it is. There isn't anything like this out there that talks about streaming and the level of depth and putting strategy out there. try some of it. It might be completely flat on its face. I don't want to go back and do historical streaming data because that's looking at the hindsight of players that were successful. These were stream picks I picked week by week. So that's what I went with the information for that week, based on the 30% owned. And again, if you work on a waiver wire that's even more expensive, you'll get better players.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if you don't play in a Sharps league, then the chances are 30% is on the lower side of player ownership. And that's, I think, partly because people hold on to players for too long. So other players aren't picked up as much. And if you're not into your fantasy football as much as you, Rush Nation, and people who play it a lot, then your league isn't going to be as high as percentages. But if you play in a league with your friends who, they don't listen to us and your percentages are higher, you got more chance of picking these guys up.
I tell you what we'll do is I think this is a good opportunity for us to maybe give something back as well. So I have a document with all my PAS working out some rankings and players. Now, the articles do have those charts in that break up and tell you where everyone's ranked from the articles that have been released so far, and they'll have them for all of them. But if you would like a hard copy, i.e. a spreadsheet with all of the calculations worked in and where all the players ranked in 2019 so that you can use and have as tiers of draft guides, if you send a donation to any form of NHS trust charity or anyone running some form of trust or charity for the NHS, anything from £2 up to whatever, just whatever you can afford to give to the NHS. If you send a screenshot of that donation to any NHS charity, trust, whatever, at this stage, for any appeal for anything, and you send a screenshot of that on Twitter to us, I will, and DM us your email address, I will email over the spreadsheet to that. I think it's the very least that we could do. I could say, look, donate to our Patreon page or whatever, but actually I think at this time it'd be good to do something for the NHS. It's our way of giving a little bit back. So yeah, any small donation you can afford, obviously the more the better, but as long as it's say £2, £2.50, something like that, you send that copy across, email it, so DM us your email and the screenshot that you've donated, and I'll email over the spreadsheet, and you can look at all the data yourself and work it all out, etc., and have it as a draft guide, because that's kind of what it is. It's a way of differentiating players in the draft. It's another tool, it's another metric you can use to help you draft better and to pick better players come draft season.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not something we should just gloss over. I think it's something we should dive into more, getting into the off season, and maybe we can get into each position a little bit more in detail and work out the math and stuff and try and explain it even more, because I think it is something that could be hugely impactful going into next draft season.
Yeah, I think so. It's definitely, I've had 100 epiphany moments when looking at this over and over again. So yeah, I think there's a lot of data in there that's useful. So but yeah, I'm happy to share it as long as there's some form of donation to the NHS, and happy to talk about it, answer questions. If people want to send questions across, we can do a pause, we can do whatever. Happy to talk about it as much as possible, especially come the season. I'm sure we'll find a way to package all of the articles together into one read. We might even do that and see what we can get.
Yeah, man. Murf, this has been a lot of fun, buddy, but I think we should save some of the fire for Thursday.
Yeah, definitely. Tune in Thursday. Great guest. Really top guy. Probably one of the most knowledgeable minds in football. So I'm looking forward to having him on, picking his brain, and he's also going to talk about a guide that he's written, as I mentioned, 1,200 pages. By that, if you're really into your fantasy football, you might know who this is. But if not, we'll talk about it where you can get access to that information on the pod as well, because I've got it. It's fantastic. I'm about 9% through, and I can't put it down. It's really good.
Yes, right, Rush Nation. Thursday's going to be an absolute banger. Don't forget to head over to NFL Store Europe. Use the code 5-yard rush for 10% off your order. And also helmethouse.co.uk. If you fancy getting a signed lid, head over there. Same code, 5-yard rush, 5% off your order. Also, head over to 5yardrush.co.uk. Check out all the articles and content that is going out there. Don't forget
And the shop.
And the shop. I was just going to say, Murf, I was going to say, don't forget to swing into the shop because, spoiler alert, maybe not tonight because I've got formatting to do before Murf does his so I can get my article out first. It's not a race. We're one squad, one love, one team here. But yeah, if you get over to the shop, there might be some fresh stuff dropping tonight, which you can get your hands on first. Just saying, Rush Nation. But Murf, this has been fun. Rush Nation, you all stay safe. Don't forget to wash those hands. Stay in, protect the NHS, or wherever you are in the world. Stay indoors. Let's get rid of this COVID. But until Thursday, Rush Nation, as always, don't forget, you keep rushing.